Hello, BookTube, and happy Halloween! We're at the end of October. Tomorrow is the 1st of November. That seems to call for yet another November TBR. November TBR meaning to be read, or TBRBY meaning to be read by you. I thought I would show you a few more November releases and chat about them just a bit, see if they interest you as much or more than they interest me. We'll start with a major name in fiction. This is Paul Auster, who has a new book out. This is Baumgartner, his book Baumgartner, a kind of stoner-esque book about a male writer and academic who loses his wife long before the main action of the novel, and is sort of puttering through his days without her in the course of this novel. I don't know how many dedicated Paul Auster fans watch this channel. I've never been a dedicated Paul Auster fan myself. He's had peaks and valleys for me, and the peaks have seemed to me to be cresting just about at C-list in terms of anything that you would want from a major A-list novelist. Inventive use of language. Realistic or even non-realistic but compelling plots. Three-dimensional, well-honed characters, especially three-dimensional, well-honed characters who aren't obvious stand-ins for the author. Any of the stuff that we usually think of as the things that we go to a major novelist for. I've never known Paul Auster to have any of those. I've never known him to display any of those qualities in anything more than what you would get from 1960s C-list novelists, all of whom are forgotten now. That leads me to believe that Auster himself will be forgotten in a century. But he's not forgotten now. He's alive now, and through sheer process of elimination, he is a major author. And so I read this thing. I didn't notice anything even remotely human in this book, especially the main character, who is supposed to be etched all over. He's supposed to be circumscribed all over by grief, which is old, years old at the beginning of this book, but not scarred over. Old, but still fresh. That is, on paper, what you're supposed to be encountering here, which is supposed to interest you in this grand drama of, will the man who has all the power, all the prestige, all of the deference, all of the advantages, will this man maybe find inner rebirth? That seems to strike a lot of novelists of a certain generation as a very good dramatic engine for a novel. It's actually, I couldn't think of a question more boring than that. Nevertheless, if you like Paul Auster, he has a few gimmicks. There are a few authors on this list who have a few gimmicks. He has a few gimmicks. If you like those gimmicks, you'll like this book. One piece of advance notice about this that I read called it ambitious. It most certainly is not. I can't think of a safer novel this year. But it's coming out in November, and it's a big deal. It'll be at the front of your book section, that's for sure. Then we have another front list novelist. This is Michael Cunningham. Probably a lot of you are familiar with this author. I don't know how many people that watch my channel are familiar with Paul Auster, but with Michael Cunningham, probably he wrote The Hours, probably his most famous book. This is his new book, Day, another austere American cover. One was just a frozen over water pump. This is just a sky with a blue cloud in it. So the person who's getting paid to design covers on the books, I guess, got a day off. And this is a familiar pattern with Cunningham. He's done this a few times. I would argue almost every time he does a novel. He does a novel about gay temptation darkening the hollow bliss of heterosexual marriage. He comes back to that often in his books. And he does in this book, which is about a man and a woman who are in a frittering marriage as they both realize that they may or may not be personally and even erotically fixated with a third party who is a man. It's well done. I wouldn't mind if Cunningham had a shtick, if he came at it freshly, and he doesn't in this book. So it reminded me of a couple of his other books, and also damningly, it reminded me of a couple of Alan Hollinghurst's books. So I don't know what to make of that. I will give this another try when I get the finished copy. But if this author is definitely a must-buy author of yours, well, he has a new book coming out. If he's a must-buy author of yours, you probably knew that. But I thought I'd point it out anyway. He's another feature on the landscape of major contemporary novels for the month of November. Then we have Omid Scobie. Has a new book called Endgame: Inside the Royal Family and the Monarchy's Fight for Survival. A breathless and uninformed thing. The thing you have to understand about almost all commentary, whether it's magazines or talking heads on a news show or books, the thing you have to understand about almost all of it is that it is uninformed. These people are speculating. They're in fact writing fan fiction. They don't know what they're talking about. So here you have, what was it called again? The Monarchy's Fight for Survival. The monarchy is a well-heeled and extremely established institution. It's not fighting for its survival, is point number one. and point number two here is that there are tensions in the monarchy that are now much closer to the surface. For some reason, Scobie wants to attach a lot of that to the death of Queen Elizabeth II, when actually the reason for a lot of those tensions is pictured on this cover. It's these two. it's Prince Harry and his American wife, who seem to alternate on alternate days of the week between wanting to destroy the monarchy or wanting to be absolute monarchs, and never quite knowing where they're going to come down on that issue. But you're looking at the future of the monarchy. It's not embattled at all. Prince Charles and Camilla will be monarchs until he dies, and then Prince Charles's eldest son, Prince William, will become King William, and that'll be that. It'll keep going on. Whether or not, I don't know, some radical legislation passes to get the monarchy. I don't know how you could sideline their authority any more than the country already has, but maybe you could attack their finances. I don't see that happening, so this was all much ado about nothing, and with no good insights. Every single personal insight here about any of these six are the six main characters in the book, but about anybody else as well. All of them are gleaned from Royalty magazine or the Crown magazine. There's nothing informed about this at all, but it is going to be out in bookstores, and though some of you love reading about the monarchy as much as I do, the embattled House of Windsor as much as I do, you're going to maybe look at this and think, is this something? It isn't. It isn't something. Just in case we're wondering, this is not a TBRBY. This is just a field. Excuse me. This is just a field guide to some books that you might see coming out in November. That's all. Well, this next one looks really good. I haven't got to it yet. This is by Jake Berman, and it is The Lost Subways of North America, that takes a look at planned subway lines in America and Canada. Takes a look at planned subway lines that never came to fruition. Takes a look at subway lines that did get built and then were allowed to fall into disuse. The author brings up a lot of subway folklore about lines that, for instance, in a couple of cases were completed, a huge construction project, a year or more to construct a subway line. They were completed, and then the public was told that they weren't being used anymore, but is that true? What's going on in all of those tunnels? Delightful stuff, especially if you're familiar with subway systems. I've been intimately familiar with the subway systems of both New York and especially Boston, so this is immediately intriguing to me. If you live in, I guess, the 90% of the world that doesn't have subway systems, then maybe this would strike you as a weird bit of urban arcana, and maybe it is. But I thought it looks promising to me. Then we have I don't know if this is translated or not. This is Jean-Pierre Filiou, and it's The Middle East, a history from AD 400 to the present day. I don't hold out much hope for this. The span is too big. I think the page count is around 500. That's obviously not enough space to do this justice. So what is the author trying to get at here is the question I always have with histories of the Middle East. They're so irretrievably politicized that I look at them thinking, what is the author's point? What is the author's agenda? I almost never look at these things thinking, oh, well, time to sink into a history. Because the author might call it a history, but they're usually never doing that. They usually have a point. And this thing, the history of the Middle East from AD 400 to AD 600 could fill a book 10 times this size. So that this covers 2,000 years means the author has a point. Almost certainly it does. I could be wrong. I'll give it a try and report back. But almost certainly the author has a point of some kind or other. And that point is usually good guys and bad guys. Especially the closer you get to the present day, especially once you get to the Balfour Declaration. So we will see. We will see. The yardstick that I tend to use with books like this that claim this kind of a canvas is the Balfour Declaration, and specifically where it takes place. If this is a 500-page book and the Balfour Declaration takes place on page 100, then the title is a lie. And you could easily have fixed it by packaging this as a 20th century history of the Middle East. You could easily have fixed things if you'd done that. Will this be guilty of that? I don't know. I will give it a try anyway. Then we have John Gray. John Gray is he's a mystery to me. He's a public philosopher, a very low wattage. I've never read anything. I've read 2 or 3 things by this guy. I've reviewed him a couple of times. I've read 2 or 3 things by him. They strike me as just, I don't know, the meanderings of a middling smart guy who's just decided he's going to think out loud on paper for a couple of pages, which is fine. That's absolutely fine. There are plenty of people who do that, but they don't have a major publisher waiting to snap up the results and put them in typeset. I've never encountered anything from him that strikes me as even moderately deep thinking, let alone philosophy. And this is his latest book, The New Leviathans, Thoughts After Liberalism. The title obviously referring to Hobbes and the Leviathan. I mean, I'm not just criticizing this guy because he wrote a whole book about cats. Although that seems to be about his métier, is that you're sitting on the couch or at your kitchen table and you have a string of thoughts. They could just as easily be provoked by a houseplant as by your cat. And you write a book of thoughts, of thinkings on the subject. I don't know. Maybe this book will change my mind. I keep coming back to this author. He has inexplicably a publishing career as a kind of public intellectual. Maybe this book will be the one that does it. Maybe this will change my mind about him. We will see. Then, this is going to be tricky. Talk about not holding out much hope. This is a work of translation, a literature translation by C. Luke Soucy, Soucy, and it is a new translation of Ovid's Metamorphoses. A wonderful cover here. I think this is a small academic press. I believe this comes out in November. For those of you who are new to my channel, Ovid's Metamorphoses is my single favorite book of them all. Not just from ancient Rome, but ever. And I've also read all the translations of it. This is a new one for me. You'd think that would excite me, and maybe there's a part of me that is excited. This is an exciting prospect. But the last couple of years have been heydays of people having an agenda, much like that Middle Eastern book. I'm going to use my university learning to go to an ancient text, but I don't care what the ancient text says. I have a political agenda. I want to reconstruct this text so that it can no longer be used by my political enemies, i.e. men. I'll just use the shorthand of men. And I don't know, naturally my hackles are up. I don't know whether or not this author will do the same thing for my favorite book. The translator is very young. He seems very twee. Seems to have a lot of irons in the fire, lots of hobbies, lots of social media engagement. Translating Ovid's Metamorphoses is incredibly difficult to do. It's not easy to translate this work, even a small passage of it, much less the whole thing. And am I getting the whole thing? It says that it's translated and edited. I don't know what that could mean. One of two things: either the author abridged, didn't translate the whole work, or that just means that the author is adding an introduction and notes and whatnot. I obviously can't let this go, so I will dig into it probably soon, and see. I'm not gonna lie, my hackles will be up about this. All of the signals that it's giving off to my bookish spidey sense are wrong. The wrong signals, bad signals. All of those signals are that the author does is going to try to use this work, manipulate it, make it a Beowulf about women, for instance, to use a notorious recent example. We shall see. I would like to think, if this author is a classicist, I would like to think that Ovid will win out. But this poem has a lot of stuff in it that you can't translate into English today in the censorious 21st century without being canceled yourself. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. We will give it a try. This next one, I think I do know what to expect, although the subtitle throws me off a little. This is by Bill Fulton and Jean Chilton Devon, and it's called Survive and Thrive. It's a prepper manual. Doomsday prepper. End the world prepper. You know what, hitting the fan prepper manual. It's got the textured green camo cover and all the de rigueur stuff about it. But the subtitle is How to Prepare for Any Disaster Without Ammo, Camo, or Eating Your Neighbor. That makes me think maybe these two will take a different approach, maybe a less hysterical approach, which would be really great. That would be really great if they did that. I don't see enough prepper guides, survival guides that do that skip the hysterics. Don't try to frighten your audience, but instead, don't try to psychologically prepare them for cannibalism. Although the far-right wingnut and American traitor Alex Jones, for instance, he did even an interview last year in which he seemed not only prepared to eat his neighbors, but downright eager to eat them. I know of a way this book could be done. There is a non-hysterical way to do this, and it's a very important thing to do. I'm hoping these two authors have written that book. We shall see. The non-panicky way here is to talk about just simple questions. What would you and your loved ones do if there was no supermarket? What would you do if your house had no power? Simple as that. Just simple questions like that. The reality that there might be no supermarket, or more importantly, that you would have no access to it, and the reality that your power would go out, your water, your electricity, your heating, those realities are a thin whisker away from where you live every day. We don't like to think about it. We skate along on the ice, but that infrastructure is vulnerable to all kinds of things, from an act of terrorism to an act of state warfare to an act of God. That infrastructure is extremely vulnerable. If you live in an earthquake-prone area, a fire-prone area, a storm-prone area, then you already know this. A lot of people who live in areas like that or live with possibilities like that do not take any preparation. And I'm hoping that this book tells you what that preparation is. Some of it is very, very basic. Do you have 2 or 3 well-stocked basic medical kits? Very basic stuff, but not just one. To have one is to have none. You must have more than one. You must assume that if you have the one, it's going to be despoiled or destroyed somehow by circumstance. So you need more than one. Do you have that? Even that? That would be easy to do. Do you even have that? Do you have a pallet of drinking water? I'm not saying 10 pallets, but I'm also not saying 1 gallon bottle in the back of the refrigerator. We're talking about a gallon a day per person. Do you have a pallet of drinking water tucked away in a corner of the basement? Do you have a cabinet somewhere in your kitchen with non-perishable food items that you are routinely checking? You do not have to be a prepper. You don't have to be nuts about it. But you're routinely checking to make sure the dates are forward, that they're up to date, that nothing is spoiled. Do you have that? Do you have enough non-perishable food and items and a water supply to last you a week if you have no ability to replenish from the normal sources that you think about? Simple as that. Not talking here about the you-know-what hitting the fan. Not talking about, an EMP or whatever. I'm saying just that. Do you have that? A working medical kit. A transistor radio with a supply of batteries so that you know what's going on in the outside world if the internet goes down, if phone service goes down. Do you have that? That's not hard to get. It's easy to update. It's easy to upkeep in almost any space. Most Americans don't have that. So they are totally at the mercy of skating along on the ice. They're totally at the mercy of the supermarket always being open, of the pharmacy always being open. I'm hoping that these two go talk about that food, health, water, shelter, heat. Do you have those things? Do you have a tarp, even, or a couple of them? Do you have a family plan for what would happen if suddenly the lights went out and weren't going to come back on anytime soon? Do you have a generator, for instance? A reliable gas-powered generator and a few canisters of gas for that generator in case you lose all of that infrastructure in the middle of winter. It's something to think about. I always go for these books hoping that they won't be crazy. So I'll have to hope that these two are not crazy. Then we have Michael Gross. This is his history of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So this is the flight of the WASP, of the rise and fall of America's original ruling class. The white Anglo-Saxon Protestants here. I have no idea how anecdote-filled this book will be. If it's mainly anecdote-driven, that's going to get a little boring. I've read books like that before. If it's a study, well, that's a big subject. That's a really, really big subject. But it's history coming out at the end of the year, and that's going to taper off. So I'll take it. Definitely, I'll take it. Okay, I promise there aren't going to be grizzly bears in every video like this. This is Art Wolfe, who is a nature photographer. He's a really good nature photographer. You're amazed at the shots that he gets, including the one on the cover of this book. This is called Wild Lives, and that is the cover. That is a 1,000-pound grizzly bear charging through the water directly at you. Though this was, I hope, taken with a telephoto lens. Otherwise, this is a posthumous publication. This has essays. It says that it has essays by Gregory Greene. I don't know who Gregory Greene is. I don't know if they're really going to be essays. But it means that this book will have text. So natural history, maybe, or anecdotes about the wild. Apart from just Art Wolfe's anecdotes, which would be great. This will be big. This will be a big, expensive item. This is definitely what is routinely called a coffee table book. Definitely a holiday extravaganza and an exorbitant gift either to someone else or to yourself. But if you go online, you can see samples of this guy's artwork. His nature photography is just incredible. To have it in a book where you can study the details and where you can read up, this will have a lot of original prose. To have it in a book would be really worth it, I think. It wouldn't be worth it for me anymore. I get big, oversized coffee table books and almost immediately get rid of them. They're really, really beautiful. They are wonders of craft, and it takes a lot of work to produce one. But I don't go to them enough to warrant keeping them, usually, myself. But a lot of people aren't like that. A lot of people love them. So, and there are, in November and December, there are a handful of eye-opening examples of really beautiful things. Atlases, world guides, nature photography like this one. So if you're one of those people, you want to know this is coming out. And then we can finish up with Steve Virapan. This is a new biography that I think has been out in the UK already. This is The Wisest Fool, The Lavish Life of James VI and the First. With him looking like a positive dreamboat on the cover. What he would have given to look like that. This is probably going to be an attempt to rehabilitate the reputation of James VI. James I. It's probably going to be an attempt to do that. I read one of those once about 10 years ago that was actually very good. It really made me think, how much of this figure's posthumous vilification was agenda-driven itself. I confess, I hadn't really thought of the extent to which that might be true. And that book, I wish I could remember the name of it. I think I reviewed it. I think I talked about it. I think I reviewed it before I had this channel, though. So I'll look around. Maybe I can put a note down below of what it was. But I preface it with that earlier unknown book to point out that trying to rehabilitate the reputation of this figure is not worthless. It has led at least once in my reading to a really good reading experience. So this could be too. I worry about it only because there's only so much rehabilitation you can do with this moron. With this treacherous, horrible, gnarled little moron. I don't know how much you can do with it. It's a natural impulse on the part of biographers to go at some figure with a cloud over it and try to dispel the cloud. It's a fun thing for me to read about, unless the biographer goes too far. We'll see. I'm a sucker for royal biographies anyway, so I would never have missed this. But the fact that it has an agenda makes it all the more interesting to me. We'll see if that agenda bears out. And there you go. That is a November, I don't know, it's not TBR because I've read a lot of these things. It's not a TBR BY because I'm not encouraging you to read a lot of these things. So I don't know what I would call it. November releases, I guess. That is a list of some November releases that in the month that is right here. It snuck up on all of us. So November is around the corner. So if any of these interest you, feel free to let your library know that. I'm gonna wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.